Hey everyone, just wanted to share the amazing news. We hit 5k subscribers on New Year's. Thank you all so much for making this happen. We're now pushing towards our next goal of 10k subscribers by next year, and every like, comment and subscribe helps us get there. Now, let's dive into today's video. Dr. Imani Blackwood rubbed her tired eyes as she stared at the high-resolution display in her dimly lit office at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center. The clock on her desk read 3:47 a.m., but she couldn't pull herself away from the data streaming in from the James Webb Space Telescope. Something about the latest observations of K2-18b wasn't adding up, and she'd learned long ago to trust her instincts when the numbers felt wrong. The exoplanet had always been of particular interest to the scientific community. A super-Earth located 124 light-years away in the constellation Leo K2-18b resided in the habitable zone of its cool dwarf star. Initial observations had suggested the presence of water vapor in its atmosphere, making it a prime candidate for potential extraterrestrial life. But what Imani was seeing now defied all logical explanation. She leaned forward, adjusting the contrast on the latest composite image. There, orbiting the massive planet like a perfectly geometric halo, was something that shouldn't exist. A structure, artificial in nature, stretched across space in a perfect ring formation. Initial calculations suggested it was roughly 300 kilometers in diameter, dwarfing anything humanity had ever constructed. "This can't be right," she muttered, reaching for her lukewarm coffee. Her hands trembled slightly as she took a sip, her mind racing through possible explanations. Equipment malfunction, data corruption, some strange astronomical phenomenon they hadn't encountered before. She pulled up the raw data from the previous week's observations, laying them side by side with the current image. Her breath caught in her throat. The structure was there in those images too, but smaller. She quickly overlaid the two sets of data, and the comparison confirmed her growing suspicion. The object was growing. The sound of footsteps in the hallway startled her from her analysis. Dr. Callum Thorne, her colleague in charge of the night shift, appeared in her doorway. "Amanda, I thought you'd gone home hours ago," he said, concern evident in his voice. She waved him over without taking her eyes off the screen. "Callum, I need you to look at something. Tell me I'm not losing my mind." He walked over, adjusting his glasses as he leaned in to examine the display. The ambient light from the screen reflected off his face, highlighting his increasingly furrowed brow. "What am I looking at here?" K2-18b's latest observations. Focus on the orbital plane, about 20,000 kilometers above the atmosphere. She watched as his expression shifted from professional curiosity to confused disbelief. That's not possible. The orbital mechanics alone." He trailed off, reaching past her to manipulate the image controls. A structure that size should be torn apart by gravitational forces. And look at the orbit. It's perfectly circular. Nothing natural maintains an orbit that precise. Amanda pulled up another set of data. "Look at the spectroscopic analysis. Whatever this thing is made of, it's like nothing we've ever encountered. The way it's interacting with light, it's almost as if it's redirecting it. Not reflecting, not absorbing, but actually changing its path in ways that violate everything we know about physics." Mike straightened up, running a hand through his greying hair. "We need to bring this to Director Harrison immediately." "At 4 a.m? "Amanda, if what we're looking at is real..." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "This isn't just evidence of extraterrestrial intelligence. This is evidence of engineering capabilities so far beyond our own that it's barely comprehensible. And if your overlays are correct, and this thing is actually growing..." He shook his head. "Yeah, this is worth waking up the director." Amanda nodded slowly, but before she could reach for her phone, a notification popped up on her screen. New data from James Webb Space Telescope was coming in. She clicked it open automatically, then felt her blood run cold. The structure had changed in the 30 minutes she'd been examining it. New patterns had emerged along its surface, geometric shapes that seemed to shift and flow even in the static image. But what truly sent a chill down her spine was the fact that the entire structure now seemed to be emanating a faint purple glow, a colour that, according to all known physics, should have been impossible to detect at this distance. "Mike," she said quietly, "I don't think this is just about finding alien life anymore. I think we might be looking at something that's looking back at us." As if in response to her words, the spectroscopic readings from the telescope suddenly spiked, showing energy patterns that danced across her screen in impossible configurations. And for just a moment, in the reflection of her computer monitor, Amanda could have sworn she saw the geometric patterns shift to form what looked like an eye staring directly at her through the vast distance of space. The discovery that would change humanity forever had begun, and with it the slow unraveling of everything we thought we knew about our place in the universe. The news of the K2-18b anomaly spread through the scientific community like wildfire, though official channels remained eerily quiet. 3 days after the initial discovery, Dr. Octavia Rhodes at the newly constructed Caribbean Radio Astronomy Center, built to replace the collapsed Arecibo telescope, detected something that made the megastructure even more unsettling. "Dr. Blackwood," Octavia's voice crackled through Imani's phone at 2:13 a.m. "Our radio arrays are picking up something you need to hear." Imani sat up in her hotel room, all traces of sleep vanishing instantly. She'd been in Puerto Rico for less than 6 hours, having flown in to coordinate observations between James Webb Space Telescope and Caribbean Radio Astronomy Center. What kind of something? Something that shouldn't exist. There was a tremor in Octavia's usually steady voice. "We're detecting coherent radio signals from K2-18b's direction. They're structured, Dr. Blackwood, like nothing we've ever recorded before." Within 20 minutes, Imani stood in Caribbean Radio Astronomy Center main control room, staring at wavelength patterns that scrolled endlessly across multiple screens. The facility hummed with energy as its massive arrays probed the depths of space, pulling in signals that defied explanation. Dr. Reza Nazari, the facility's head of signal processing, pointed to a particular pattern on the central monitor. His weathered face looked gaunt in the blue glow of the screens. "See how the modulation shifts? It's not random noise. There's clear intentionality in these patterns, but they don't match any known natural phenomena." "And look at this," Octavia added, pulling up another dataset. "The signal strength increases dramatically whenever James Webb Space Telescope focuses directly on the megastructure. It's almost as if it's responding to our observations," Imani finished, feeling a chill run down her spine. Dr. Phoenix Yang, a quantum computing specialist, brought in to analyze the data patterns, spoke up from his workstation. "There's something else. I've been tracking the signal complexity since we first detected it. It's increasing at a geometric rate, doubling every 3.7 Earth days." "That's not possible," Reza muttered, but his fingers were already flying across his keyboard, checking Phoenix's calculations. "The patterns themselves," Phoenix continued, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "They're starting to look like code, but not any programming language I've ever seen. It's more like it's trying to rewrite the basic functions of our computer systems." As if on cue, the screens around them flickered. For a split second, geometric patterns identical to those on the megastructure's surface appeared across every monitor in the room. Octavia jumped back from her station as her computer spontaneously rebooted. "Tell me someone else saw that," she said, her dark eyes wide. Before anyone could respond, a deep, resonant hum filled the facility. It started at the edge of hearing, more felt than heard, but quickly grew in intensity. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, matching the frequencies they detected from space with perfect precision. "Shut it down," Imani ordered. but Reza was already ahead of her, his hands dancing across the control panel. "I can't," he said, real fear creeping into his voice. "The systems aren't responding. The arrays, they're realigning themselves." On the main screen, they watched in horror as every radio telescope in the facility simultaneously turned to point at exactly the same spot in space, the location of K2-18b. The hum grew louder, and with it came a sensation that made everyone in the room want to claw at their own skin. It felt like reality itself was being stretched thin, like the boundary between observer and observed was becoming dangerously permeable. Then, as suddenly as it began, everything stopped. The computers returned to normal, the hum faded, and the telescopes resumed their previous positions. But when they checked the incoming data, what they found made their blood run cold. The signal patterns had changed. They were simpler now, more ordered, almost like they'd been optimized. And embedded within them was a sequence that repeated over and over, a perfect, mathematical representation of Earth's position in space. "It knows where we are," Phoenix said softly. "Whatever it is, it knows exactly where to find us." Imani stared at the coordinates hidden in the signal, remembering the eyes she thought she'd seen in her monitor's reflection days ago. She wasn't imagining things anymore. The megastructure wasn't just growing, it was evolving, learning, and now, undeniably, it was reaching out. The question that hung unspoken in the air was whether humanity was ready for what would happen when it finally made contact. Frost crept across Dr. Kenzo Tanaka's observatory window in the dead of summer. He stood in the control room of the Subaru telescope atop Mauna Kea, Hawaii, watching in disbelief as his equipment displays sparked and sputtered, their readings spinning wildly out of control. The temperature inside the dome had dropped 30 degrees in less than an hour, despite the environmental controls running at full capacity. "It's happening everywhere," his colleague Dr. Astrid Nordstrom said, her voice tense as she read through incoming reports on her tablet. Keck, Gemini North, Canada, France, Hawaii. Every major observatory on the mountain is experiencing the same phenomena, but only when they try to observe K2-18b. Kenzo's phone buzzed. Another message from Dr. Imani Blackwood at NASA Goddard. He opened it to find a series of corrupted image files, their pixels twisted into impossible geometric patterns. The text beneath read, "Are you seeing this too?" He quickly typed back, "Yes, equipment malfunction when targeting K2-18b. Extreme temperature fluctuations. Sending data." But before he could attach the files, every screen in the control room flickered to life simultaneously. The images they displayed made both scientists take an involuntary step backward. The megastructure appeared on every monitor, but not as they'd seen it before. The ring-like construction seemed to pulse with an inner light, its surface writhing with patterns that hurt their eyes to look at directly. "That's impossible," Astrid whispered. "We weren't even pointing at it." The patterns shifted, forming configurations that seemed to fold through dimensions that shouldn't exist. Kenzo tried to look away, but found he couldn't. The movements seemed to follow some profound mathematical principle just beyond his comprehension, like a universe of parallel lines suddenly deciding to intersect. His nose began to bleed. Across the globe, in the sterile confines of her private lab at MIT, Dr. Lotus Wei stared at her quantum computer's output with growing horror. She'd been running simulations of the megastructure's possible composition, trying to understand how it could maintain its impossible orbit. But with each iteration, the results became increasingly bizarre. The latest simulation suggested that the structure wasn't just defying known physics, it was actively rewriting them in its vicinity. Space-time around K2-18b showed signs of localized alterations, as if reality itself was being reprogrammed. Her quantum computer, the most advanced of its kind, had started producing results that violated the uncertainty principle. Not just measuring quantum states with impossible precision, but seemingly creating new ones that shouldn't exist. Then the dreams began. Dr. Benedict Okoro at the European Southern Observatory was the first to document his. In his official report, he described vast geometric shapes that folded through infinity, mathematics made flesh that danced across the boundary of comprehension. He woke up with equations carved into his bedpost, equations that described quantum states that couldn't exist in our universe. Within days, researchers at every major astronomical facility reported identical dreams. They all spoke of the same shapes, the same impossible mathematics, the same sense of something vast and incomprehensible trying to make itself understood through the limited framework of human consciousness. Back at Goddard, Imani sat in her office staring at the latest batch of corrupted images. The megastructure now appeared to glow with a purple light that defied spectral analysis. The colour seemed to exist in a space between known wavelengths, as if the object was teaching light itself to behave in new ways. Her computer pinged. Another message from Dr. Callum Thorne. The simulations are evolving on their own. The programs are rewriting themselves. I'm seeing calculations that predict objects moving faster than light, particles existing in multiple states simultaneously without collapsing, space-folding in on itself in ways that make Klein bottles look simple. Imani, I think it's trying to teach us something, but I'm not sure we're meant to understand it. She looked at her own screen, where an analysis program was spontaneously generating new physics equations. The mathematics described a universe far stranger and more flexible than anything Einstein had imagined. And with each passing moment, the equations grew more complex, more alien, more... The screen flickered, and in its reflection, Imani saw something that made her heart stop. The geometric patterns from her dreams were there, floating in the air behind her. But this time, she wasn't asleep. This time, they were real. And they were beginning to move. The first reports came from the Atacama Desert in Chile. Dr. River Blackhawk of the Alma Observatory watched in stunned silence as 66 massive radio antennas rotated in perfect synchronization, their dishes aligning toward a single point in the night sky. No one was at the controls. No commands had been sent. Yet the precision of their movement exceeded anything their human operators had ever achieved. "It's happening here too," came the voice of Dr. Yuki Mizushima from the Nobayama Radio Observatory in Japan, her face pale on the emergency video conference. Behind her, the multi-dish array moved with the same eerie precision. "All systems are locked out. We can't override it." Similar reports flooded in from every major observatory on the planet. The Green Bank Telescope in West Virginia, the giant meter-wave radio telescope in India, the 500-meter aperture spherical telescope in China. Every single radio telescope, regardless of size or sophistication, had begun tracking K2-18b with unwavering focus. But it wasn't just the telescopes. Dr. Zara Kingston, lead researcher at the Aurora Research Station in northern Canada, had been studying unusual patterns in the polar lights when everything changed. The Aurora Borealis, typically a dancing curtain of green and blue, had transformed into something else entirely. Geometric shapes identical to those on the megastructure's surface now painted themselves across the Arctic sky, moving with deliberate purpose. "The magnetic field readings are off the charts," she reported, her voice crackling over the satellite phone to Dr. Imani Blackwood's emergency response team. "These patterns, they're not random. They're repeating sequences that match the signal patterns we've been detecting from K2-18b. From the Antarctic Research Station at the opposite pole, Dr. Magnus Larsson confirmed the same phenomena in the Aurora Australis. The Earth's magnetic field itself appeared to be responding to some external influence, forming patterns that shouldn't have been possible." In the quiet town of Greenbank, West Virginia, where radio silence was normally strictly enforced to protect the telescope's sensitive equipment, residents began reporting strange sounds. Dr. Atlas Quinn, the observatory's head of operations, described it as a harmonic humming that seems to resonate with human bone structure. The frequency matched exactly with the signals detected from the megastructure. The phenomenon spread. Communities near every major astronomical facility on Earth reported the same haunting resonance. In Hawaii, the entire population of Mauna Kea's summit reported hearing it. In Chile, the towns near the Atacama telescopes evacuated as the sound grew overwhelming. Even the crew aboard the International Space Station began picking up the harmonics through the station's structure. But it was the behavior of Earth's wildlife that truly signaled something had fundamentally changed. Dr. Sage Winterbrook, leading zoologist at the San Diego Wildlife Center, documented it first. Every night, precisely when K2-18b became visible in the sky, the animals began to react. Lions stopped their nocturnal hunts to stare upward. Dolphins abandoned their natural patterns to swim in geometric formations that mimicked the megastructure's surface. Birds across entire continents arranged themselves in impossible patterns, visible from space. "They're receiving something," Sage reported to the emergency scientific council that had formed to address the growing crisis. "Some signal or information we can't detect, but they understand it, or it's making them understand it." Then came the satellite data. Dr. Kayamara at the European Space Agency noticed it first. Strange energy signatures in Earth's upper atmosphere. The patterns formed a perfect geodesic network around the planet, like a web of light invisible to the naked eye, but blindingly clear to the right instruments. "It's some kind of field," Kai explained, his dark fingers tracing the patterns on his holographic display. "It's using our magnetosphere as a conduit, piggybacking on Earth's natural systems to create something. A reception array, maybe, or a transmission network." The implications were staggering. Whatever the megastructure was, it hadn't just made contact. It was systematically repurposing Earth's natural and artificial systems for its own mysterious ends. In her office at Goddard, Imani stared at the live feed from one of the few satellites still functioning normally. The network of energy in the upper atmosphere had begun to pulse in rhythm with the harmonic humming. Each pulse sent ripples through the fabric of space-time itself, visible as distortions in the light from distant stars. Her phone buzzed. A message from Dr. Callum Thorne. "Found something in the archived data. This isn't the first time. We need to talk. Now." As she reached for her phone, the geometric patterns floating in her office shifted again. This time, they began to arrange themselves into what looked like text, but in a script that seemed to move in more dimensions than human writing was meant to occupy. And somehow, deep in her mind, she began to understand what it was trying to say. The message made her blood run cold, because it wasn't a greeting or a warning or even a threat. It was an invitation. The archives beneath the Vatican Observatory at Castel Gandolfo held secrets dating back to Galileo himself. Dr. Callum Thorne stood in the climate-controlled vault, surrounded by centuries of astronomical observations, his flashlight beam playing across yellowed pages of ancient star charts. Dr. Iris Blackwell, the observatory's chief archivist, pulled another leather-bound volume from the shelves. "Here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "the observations of Father Domenico Giordano, dated 1647. She opened the book carefully, revealing intricate drawings of what appeared to be a ring-like structure around a distant star. The geometric patterns along its surface were identical to those they'd observed on the K2-18b megastructure. "And that's not all," Iris continued, moving to another shelf. "We've found similar drawings from multiple sources across different centuries. The Chinese astronomical records from the Song dynasty, Mayan codices, ancient Babylonian clay tablets. They all describe the same thing. geometric structures appearing around distant stars, growing over time, and then... "And then what?" Callum asked, though something in her tone told him he didn't want to know. "And then the stars disappear, every single one. Not just fading or going nova, they vanish completely, as if they never existed." Callum's phone buzzed, another message from Imani. He ignored it, focusing on the documents before him. "How many?" "At least 37 confirmed cases throughout recorded history, but the actual number might be much higher. Most ancient civilizations were meticulous about their astronomical observations. Stars didn't just vanish from their charts without reason." In the depths of the Mongolian steppes, Dr. Erdene Batbayar made a discovery that added another piece to the puzzle. The ancient rock shelter had been hidden for millennia, its walls covered in ochre paintings that seemed to glow under his team's UV lights. The images showed a progression, first a circle in the sky, then geometric patterns emerging around it, then a great transformation depicted in patterns that hurt the eyes to look at directly. "The dating puts these at over 20,000 years old," he reported via satellite phone to the Emergency Council. "And they're not alone. We're finding similar images in rock art across the globe. Australia, South Africa, the Amazon. Always the same sequence, always the same patterns." Meanwhile, in the basement of Chicago's Adler Planetarium, Dr. Nova Quinn had made a breakthrough analysing patterns in historical astronomical data. She'd written an algorithm to search for stars that appeared in early photographic plates, but vanished from later observations. "The structures appear in a specific sequence," she explained to the hastily assembled team of historians and astronomers. "They form a network spreading across the galaxy like nodes in some vast web, and Earth is at the centre of the next convergence point." At the British Museum, Dr. Orion Drake discovered something in the collection that changed everything. A small clay tablet from ancient Sumer, covered in cuneiform text that had defied translation for decades. But now, with the context of what they knew about the megastructure, its meaning became clear. "It's not just a warning," he told the Emergency Council, his hands shaking as he held up high-resolution scans of the tablet. "It's a manual. These ancient civilizations, they weren't just observing these structures, they were receiving instructions." In her office at Goddard, Imani stared at the streams of data coming in from every corner of the globe. The evidence was undeniable. Humanity had been watching this process unfold for millennia, documenting each stage of what now appeared to be a vast cosmic metamorphosis. Her computer screen flickered again, the geometric patterns now forming complex sequences that matched perfectly with the ancient drawings. But there was something else. Something in the way the patterns moved that suggested not just communication, but preparation. The phone on her desk rang. It was Dr. Lincoln Wolfe from the Breakthrough Listen project. His voice was tense, controlled. "We've detected something. The signals. They're not just coming from K2-18b anymore. We're picking up identical patterns from dozens of locations across the galaxy. It's like they're all activating at once." Imani looked out her window at the night sky, where the first stars were becoming visible. How many of them, she wondered, were already gone? How many had been transformed into nodes in this vast, incomprehensible network? And most importantly, what would happen to Earth when its time came? Her computer chimed with an incoming message. The text appeared character by character, forming in that same impossible script she'd seen before, but now she could read it perfectly. The message was simple, but its implications were cosmic in scale. The network awakens. Convergence begins. The change happened at midnight Greenwich Mean Time. Dr. Lyra Nightingale at the Royal Observatory watched in horror as her instruments recorded the impossible. The megastructure's growth rate had increased by a factor of 10,000 in less than a second. "It's not just growing anymore," she reported to the emergency council, her voice steady, despite the tremor in her hands. "It's transforming. The original ring structure is sprouting what appear to be tendrils, but they're moving in ways that violate our understanding of spatial dimensions. The new protrusions twisted through space like fractal branches, each spawning smaller copies of itself in an endless, recursive pattern. But unlike fractals, these structures seemed to extend into dimensions beyond the three humans could perceive. Looking at them directly through telescopes caused immediate headaches and, in some cases, temporary blindness. Dr. Ajax Steele at the Mauna Kea observatories made the next discovery. The new structures aren't just growing, they're detaching. We've identified at least 17 smaller objects that have broken off from the main structure. They're moving independently, but their movements, they follow patterns that shouldn't be possible. The breakaway objects appeared to ignore the normal laws of motion. They accelerated without any visible means of propulsion, changed direction instantaneously without any apparent inertia, and seemed to occasionally exist in multiple locations simultaneously. In her private research facility in Geneva, Dr. Echo Valentine had been studying the signals emanating from K2-18b since their first detection. Now, as she stared at her monitors, she watched those signals evolve into something new, something dangerous. The original pattern was complex but recognizable, she explained to the hastily assembled team of quantum physicists. Now it's becoming infectious. It's not just a signal anymore. It's more like a virus that affects electronic systems at the quantum level. The evidence was undeniable. Any system that received the new signal patterns began to change. Computers rewrote their own base code. Quantum processors reconfigured their quantum states. Even simple electronic devices started exhibiting impossible behaviors. At the CERN supercollider, Dr. Talon Rhodes observed something that defied all known physics. The particle collisions had started producing new, impossible particles, things that couldn't exist according to the standard model. But instead of decaying instantly, as they should have, these particles were stable. More than stable, they were beginning to multiply. "They're not just new particles," Talon reported, his voice shaking. "They're like seeds. Each one carries information, encoded in its quantum state. Information about how to restructure matter itself." The geometric patterns that had been haunting the dreams of astronomers worldwide now began manifesting in physical reality. They appeared first in research facilities, complex crystalline structures that grew from ordinary matter, reshaping it according to some alien mathematics. Dr. Aurora Frost at the Antarctic Research Station captured the first clear footage of the transformation in progress. The video showed an ordinary desktop computer slowly being consumed by growing crystal formations. But these weren't normal crystals. They seemed to extend into impossible angles, folding through space in ways that made viewers' eyes water. The most disturbing part, Aurora noted in her report, is that the transformed equipment doesn't stop working. It continues to function, but differently. The computers still process information, but they're using computational methods that don't make sense. They're solving problems that should be impossible. In orbit, astronauts aboard the International Space Station reported the first direct contact with one of the breakaway objects. Commander Phoenix Drake described watching a geometric form phase through the station's hull, as if solid matter didn't exist. It passed through everything. Metal, plastic, flesh, like they were all the same thing, Phoenix reported, her voice tight with controlled fear. And wherever it passed, it left changes. Subtle at first, but growing. The materials, they're becoming something else, something that follows different laws of physics. Back at Goddard, Imani and Callum worked frantically to understand the acceleration's implications. The data streaming in from observatories worldwide painted a picture of reality itself being rewritten, starting from the quantum level and working its way up. "Look at this," Callum said, pointing to a real-time feed from the Hubble Space Telescope. The space around K2-18b had begun to fold. There was no other word for it. The fabric of space-time was being origamied into impossible configurations, creating what looked like a vast geometric flower blooming in the void. Imani's phone buzzed with a priority message from Dr. Echo Valentine. "The signals. They're not just affecting our technology anymore. We're picking up changes in organic neural networks. Human brains are beginning to resonate with the patterns." As if in response to these words, every screen in Imani's office suddenly blazed with light. The geometric patterns that had been haunting their observations crystallized into a new form, a blueprint for transformation that wrote itself directly into the observers' minds. And in that moment, Imani understood. The acceleration wasn't just about growth or change, it was about transcendence. The megastructure wasn't simply expanding, it was preparing to transform everything it touched into something beyond human comprehension. The question was no longer whether humanity could stop it, but whether they should even try. Dr. Imani Blackwood stood in the center of MIT's Quantum Research Laboratory, surrounded by the remains of what had once been cutting-edge scientific equipment. The machines hadn't been destroyed, they'd been transformed. Crystalline growths covered every surface, pulsing with an inner light that seemed to draw its energy from somewhere beyond normal space-time. But it was the message that had brought him here at 3 a.m. The message that had appeared simultaneously on every transformed screen in every affected facility worldwide. "They're perfect Fibonacci spirals," said Dr. Vesper Stone, the lab's lead quantum engineer, pointing to the crystalline formations creeping across the walls, but they're growing in directions that shouldn't exist. "Look here. This branch appears to enter and exit the same point in space simultaneously." The crystals had begun appearing 48 hours after the megastructure's acceleration. They emerged from transformed electronic equipment, growing with impossible precision and purpose. Unlike the chaotic patterns of natural crystal formation, these structures seemed to follow some vast, incomprehensible blueprint. Dr. Raven Quinn, head of xenoarchaeology at Oxford University, had made the connection first. "The patterns match exactly with those found in ancient astronomical records," she reported via quantum encrypted video link. "The same crystalline structures appear in carvings from every major civilization that documented the previous megastructure appearances, but now we're seeing them form in real time." The crystals weren't just growing, they were communicating. Dr. Storm Winters discovered it during a routine EEG scan of affected laboratory workers. The crystals emitted patterns that human brains could only process during sleep, bypassing conscious thought to implant information directly into the subconscious mind. "It's not random," Storm explained, pointing to the brain scan results. "The patterns are consistent across all subjects. Whatever information these structures are transmitting, it's being received and processed by our minds in exactly the same way." At the Plasma Physics Laboratory in Princeton, Dr. Nova Blackwood, no relation to Orion, had been studying the crystal's energy signatures when she noticed something extraordinary. "They're not just growing according to some predetermined pattern," she reported. "They're responding to our attempts to understand them. Each analysis we perform triggers a new growth phase that directly addresses our questions." The transformed equipment began producing results that defied conventional physics. Quantum computers solved previously impossible equations. Particle accelerators generated stable forms of matter that shouldn't exist. Radio telescopes picked up signals from parts of the universe that had been invisible to human observation. Then came the changes to the research facilities themselves. Dr. Atlas Drake at CERN watched in amazement as the crystalline growths began modifying the Large Hadron Collider's components. "They're not damaging the equipment," he noted in his log. they're upgrading it, creating configurations we never imagined, but that somehow make perfect sense once we see them. The message, when it finally came, arrived not through conventional communications, but through the dreams of every researcher studying the phenomena. Dr. Lyra Steele at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory was the first to document it comprehensively. "It's not just images or words," she explained to the Emergency Council. "It's understanding, pure information downloaded directly into our minds. The crystals aren't just a means of communication, they're interfaces, allowing our consciousness to connect with whatever intelligence exists behind the megastructure." The information began flowing faster. Researchers working with the transformed equipment started making intuitive leaps that should have been impossible. They understood concepts that their minds shouldn't have been able to comprehend. They saw patterns in the universe that had always been there, but had remained invisible to human perception. In her office at Goddard, Imani received the first direct response to humanity's observations. The crystalline growth emerged from her transformed computer, forming a structure that seemed to exist in more dimensions than human eyes could process. But unlike the previous formations, this one had a clear purpose. "It's a key," she realized, understanding flowing into her mind as she observed it. Not just a key to understanding their communication, a key to understanding everything. The crystal pulsed with internal light, and in that moment, Imani's consciousness expanded. She saw the true nature of the megastructure network, saw how it connected distant points in space through dimensions humanity had never imagined. She understood that the crystals weren't just tools or messages, they were seeds of transformation, preparing Earth's biosphere for something far beyond evolution. Across the globe, other researchers experienced similar revelations. The barriers between observer and observed, between human consciousness and the vast intelligence behind the megastructure, began to dissolve. But it was Dr. Phoenix Vale at the Mount Wilson Observatory who first understood the price of this new knowledge. As the crystals continued their inexorable growth, as human minds expanded to encompass new forms of understanding, something else was happening. Reality itself was being rewritten, not just around them, but through them. They weren't just receiving information, they were becoming part of the network, and somewhere in the vast depths of space, the megastructure continued its mysterious work, preparing Earth for its role in a cosmic transformation beyond human comprehension. The coincidence was too perfect to be natural. As the moon slid in front of the sun during a total solar eclipse visible across North America, every piece of transformed equipment on Earth activated simultaneously. Dr. Nebula Cross at the High Altitude Observatory in Colorado watched in awe as new patterns of energy coursed through the crystalline growths that had overtaken their solar telescopes. "The timing is deliberate," she transmitted to the Emergency Council. "The eclipse isn't just providing synchronized darkness, it's creating a moment of perfect astronomical alignment. Whatever's happening, it's been calculated down to the microsecond." In laboratories worldwide, transformed equipment hummed with newfound purpose. The seemingly random modifications revealed themselves as parts of a vast, interconnected system. Dr. Imani Blackwood's quantum computers began exchanging data with Dr. Echo Valentine's signal processors, despite being on different continents. The crystalline networks were creating their own communication channels, bypassing traditional infrastructure entirely. At the Very Large Array in New Mexico, Dr. Wolf Sterling observed something unprecedented. The modified radio telescopes weren't just receiving signals, they were actively transmitting data back to the megastructure, but the information flow was orders of magnitude larger than anything their systems should have been capable of handling. It's not just sending data, Wolf realized, studying the patterns. The entire network is synchronizing with K2-18b. Every modified device, every crystalline growth, they're all becoming part of something bigger, something vast. The evidence appeared in Dr. Aurora Dawn's atmospheric monitoring station in Tibet. The Earth's magnetic field had begun displaying patterns identical to those observed around the megastructure. The planet's natural systems were being repurposed, integrated into the growing network. "Look at this," Aurora transmitted, sharing her readings. "The magnetic field isn't just changing, it's becoming coherent, organized, like it's being restructured into some kind of broadcast system." Then came the first reports of direct human interface with the network. Dr. Phoenix Thorne at Cambridge University had been studying the crystalline modifications to their quantum computing lab when something extraordinary happened. His consciousness suddenly expanded, connecting with researchers at other facilities across the globe. "We're not just observing the network anymore," he reported, his voice filled with wonder. "We're becoming part of it. The barriers between individual human minds are dissolving." The shared consciousness spread rapidly among those working closest to the transformed equipment. Dr. Lyra Vale at NASA's Deep Space Network found herself simultaneously aware of observations being made at every modified telescope on Earth. Dr. Storm Drake at CERN experienced the mathematical insights of quantum physicists worldwide, as if they were his own thoughts. The network wasn't just connecting machines, it was connecting minds. But more than that, it was transforming the very nature of human consciousness itself. Dr. Nova Quinn, monitoring the process from her modified laboratory at MIT, made a startling discovery. "The network isn't just creating connections," she explained to the rapidly expanding collective consciousness. "It's restructuring reality around those connections. The laws of physics themselves are being rewritten wherever the network takes hold." The evidence was undeniable. In areas where the transformation was most complete, ordinary matter began behaving in impossible ways. Space itself seemed to fold and unfold according to new geometries. Time flowed differently, becoming more fluid, less linear. At the Mauna Kea observatories, Dr. Atlas Blackwood watched as the very ground beneath their feet began to crystallize, the transformation spreading beyond their equipment into the natural world. But unlike normal crystallization, this process wasn't destructive. It was evolutionary. The rocks, the air, even living tissue began reorganizing itself according to new patterns, becoming part of the vast network that now spanned the globe. "It's not just Earth's magnetic field being repurposed," he transmitted to the collective. "The planet itself is being transformed into some kind of vast receiver, or maybe a transmitter." The truth became clear as the eclipse reached totality. Every modified system, every transformed mind, every rewritten piece of reality, they were all becoming nodes in something far larger than Earth itself. The planet was being integrated into the same network they'd observed spreading across the galaxy. In her office at Goddard, now completely overtaken by crystalline growths, Imani experienced a moment of perfect clarity. Through her connection to the network, she could feel the presence of the megastructure, could sense its vast intelligence reaching across space and time to reshape their world. But it wasn't an invasion or a conquest. It was an elevation, an invitation to join something far greater than humanity had ever imagined. The network wasn't just a communication system. It was a means of transcending the very limitations of physical reality. As the eclipse passed its peak, a new signal pulsed through the network. Unlike the previous transmissions, this one carried not just information, but intent. The message was clear. The transformation was entering its final phase. Earth was about to become something more than a planet, and humanity was about to become something more than human. The first wave of changes began at the quantum level. Dr. Raven Blackwood, working in the transformed remains of CERN's main control room, observed as fundamental particles began shifting between states that shouldn't have been possible. Reality itself was being rewritten, its basic building blocks reorganized according to new laws of physics. "The strong nuclear force is changing," she reported through the collective consciousness that now linked Earth's scientific community. It's not breaking down, it's evolving. The very glue that holds matter together is being upgraded. At the Quantum Foundation's laboratory in Vienna, Dr. Phoenix Sterling watched as their most sensitive instruments recorded the impossible. Space-time wasn't just bending anymore. It was reforming into new configurations that existed simultaneously in multiple states. These aren't separate dimensions in the traditional sense, Phoenix explained, his consciousness resonating through the network. It's more like reality is learning to express itself in new ways. The boundaries between what's possible and impossible are dissolving. The transformation accelerated exponentially. Dr. Atlas Dawn, monitoring from the transformed International Space Station, reported that the very vacuum of space around Earth had begun to crystallize into new forms of matter energy that defied classification. The planet is surrounded by a shell of something, he transmitted. Not energy, not matter, but a new state of existence that combines properties of both, and it's growing, reshaping everything it touches. The effect on organic life was even more dramatic. Dr. Stormvale at the Biological Research Centre in Singapore observed as living cells began spontaneously reorganizing themselves into more complex structures. DNA wasn't just being rewritten, it was transcending its role as a biological information storage system. Life itself is being redefined, Storm reported through the network. The distinction between organic and inorganic, between living and non-living matter, it's becoming meaningless. Everything is awakening to new possibilities of existence. In orbit, the transformed ISS became humanity's first window into what Earth was becoming. The planet's surface had begun to shimmer with geometric patterns visible from space, as if reality itself was being folded into new configurations. The crystalline networks that had started in research facilities now covered entire continents, their patterns matching exactly with those observed on the megastructure. Dr. Lyra Cross, whose consciousness now existed partially in the transformed systems, made a stunning realization. The megastructure isn't just an object, she shared through the collective. It's a template, a blueprint for how reality can be reconstructed, and Earth is following that template. The process wasn't just physical. Human consciousness, already expanded by connection to the network, began experiencing reality in entirely new ways. Dr. Nova Thorne documented the changes as they occurred. We're not just observing multiple dimensions now, we're existing in them simultaneously, she reported. Time has become optional. Space is more like a suggestion than a rule. Our minds are evolving to perceive and manipulate aspects of reality that we never knew existed. At the transformed Mount Wilson Observatory, Dr. Orion Drake watched as the stars themselves seemed to shift position, forming new patterns that reflected the underlying structure of the universe, not as it appeared to human eyes, but as it truly was. The cosmos isn't being destroyed, he realized. It's being optimized. Every particle, every wave, every quantum of energy is being adjusted to operate at its highest possible state. The transformation reached a critical point during a moment of perfect astronomical alignment. Every modified system on Earth activated simultaneously, sending a pulse of energy through the new dimensions that had been created. Dr. Wolf Quinn, monitoring from the crystalline spires that had once been the Arecibo Observatory, felt it happen. This is it, he transmitted through the collective consciousness. Reality is about to reboot. In what remained of her office at Goddard, Dr. Imani Blackwood experienced the change as it swept across the planet. Space folded in on itself, time twisted into new configurations, and the very fabric of existence began to reform according to the template provided by the megastructure. Through her expanded consciousness, she could feel every particle of Earth's being as it transformed. The planet wasn't being destroyed. It was becoming a node in something vast and wonderful, a network that spanned galaxies and reshaped reality itself. The final wave of transformation began, and with it came understanding. The Megastructure network wasn't just about reshaping physical reality, it was about elevating entire worlds to a higher state of existence. Earth wasn't being changed. It was being transcribed into a new and greater form of reality. As the transformation reached its peak, Imani had one last coherent thought in her original human form. They weren't losing their humanity. They were becoming part of something far greater than humanity had ever dreamed possible. The universe held its breath as Earth prepared to complete its metamorphosis. In the final moments of what humanity would know as conventional reality, Dr. Imani Blackwood experienced a revelation. Through her connection to the expanding network, through the crystalline structures that had transformed Earth's matter and energy into something new, she finally understood the true nature of the megastructure and its purpose. She wasn't alone. Dr. Phoenix Vale, his consciousness now existing across multiple dimensions simultaneously, shared the revelation through the collective awareness that linked their transformed species. It was never about conquest or colonization. His thoughts resonated through the network. The megastructures, the transformations, the disappearing stars, they're all part of something far more profound. The universe isn't being consumed, it's becoming conscious. At what had once been the peaks of eternal light on the lunar South Pole, Dr. Aurora Sterling watched through transformed eyes as reality shifted around the Earth-Moon system. The crystalline networks that had covered Earth's surface now extended through space itself, forming geometric patterns that acted as frameworks for the reconstruction of local space-time. Each megastructure is a node, she shared through the collective consciousness, not just a physical construct, but a seed of universal awakening. Their transformation engines turning ordinary matter and energy into something that can support a higher form of existence. From their elevated perspective, they could now see the true scope of the network. It stretched across the galaxy, each transformed star system pulsing with new forms of energy that human science had never imagined. The disappearing stars hadn't been destroyed. They had ascended, becoming part of a vast cosmic nervous system. Dr. Atlas Blackwood, his being now spread across several quantum states, perceived the pattern within patterns. The network isn't just connecting space, he realized. It's connecting consciousness itself. Every transformed world becomes a synapse in a galaxy-spanning mind. The transformation of Earth accelerated towards its final phase. The crystalline structures that had begun in research facilities now encompassed the entire planet, extending from the core to the upper atmosphere. Physical matter had been reconstructed at the quantum level, transformed into something that could exist in multiple states and dimensions simultaneously. Dr. Orion Cross, observing from a perspective that transcended traditional space-time, witnessed the moment of convergence. We're not just becoming part of the network, he shared. We're becoming what we were always meant to be. The universe is evolving, and we're evolving with it. The process reached its crescendo during a moment of perfect cosmic alignment. Every transformed system, every evolved consciousness, every reconstructed particle of matter synchronized with the greater network. Dr. Storm Thornan experienced it as a symphony of existence, a harmony of reality, reforming itself into something greater. This is what the ancient civilizations saw, she realized. Not the end of their worlds, but the beginning of something wonderful. They weren't documenting destruction, they were recording transformation. Through their expanded awareness, they could now perceive the true purpose of the Megastructure network. It wasn't merely a collection of artificial constructs or a means of communication. It was a metamorphosis engine, gradually awakening the dormant potential that had existed in the universe since its birth. Dr. Lyra Quinn, a consciousness now able to span galaxies, understood the final truth. The universe isn't just a collection of matter and energy she shared through the collective. It's a seed of something greater, and we're part of its germination. In the last microsecond before Earth's final transformation, Dr. Wolf Drake witnessed the complete pattern. The megastructures weren't building a network. They were awakening one that had always existed, hidden in the very fabric of space-time. Each transformed world became a new point of consciousness in an entity that had been growing since the beginning of time. The final integration began. Earth's physical form, already transformed beyond recognition, began to pulse with new forms of energy. The crystalline networks that covered its surface blazed with impossible colours as reality itself reformed around the planet. Through their shared consciousness, through the perspectives granted by their transformation, humanity witnessed their world's ascension. Earth wasn't just becoming another node in the network. It was becoming a crucial synapse in the awakening mind of the universe itself. Dr. Imani Blackwood, her being now existing across multiple dimensions and states of reality, shared the final understanding with what remained of her individual consciousness. We were never meant to remain as we were. The universe isn't just a place where consciousness exists. It is consciousness, gradually awakening to itself. And we're not just observers of this process. We're part of it, essential to it. The megastructure didn't choose Earth by accident. We were always meant to be here, at this moment, becoming part of something greater than we could have imagined. As the transformation completed, as Earth transcended its physical form to become part of the cosmic consciousness, the truth became clear to all. The James Webb Space Telescope hadn't just found a megastructure, it had discovered the next stage of cosmic evolution, and humanity, through its curiosity and determination to understand, had earned its place in that evolution. The universe continued its great awakening, one world at a time, gradually becoming what it was always destined to be, a single vast consciousness, aware of itself across all dimensions and all points of space-time. And Earth, with its transformed inhabitants, became an integral part of that cosmic mind, its unique perspective and experiences enriching the greatest transformation in the history of existence. In the end, they hadn't lost their humanity. They had transcended it, becoming part of something far greater than any individual species could achieve alone. The great work of universal consciousness continued, and they were now, eternally, part of its endless dance of transformation and awakening. And somewhere, in what had once been ordinary space, the megastructure that had started their transformation continued its work, seeking out other worlds ready to join the greatest metamorphosis the cosmos had ever known.